November 8th is the day a lot of people just across the border have had circled on the calendars for a while now.
After 20 months of being for essential travel only, the bridges are once again open to fully vaccinated Canadians so they can return here to Western New York and to the United States. This is a live look at the Peace Bridge right now, where the waits have been pretty short all day long after an initial rush of traffic right at midnight. There have been a lot of people who have been away from family on this side of the border for a long time now.
Or they haven't been able to visit property they own here, or they just want to visit the shops and the sites that have been locked away since the pandemic started last March. And oh yeah, the Maple Leafs are playing the Sabres here Saturday. So this return to the bridges is only getting started today.
And we've been trying to get in contact with a Customs and Border Protection officer to kind of walk us through their preparations for today. We promoted that we were going to have that interview. Unfortunately, the technology is not being very friendly. Oh. You know what? We think we may actually have the interview. Here's what we're going to do. Kate, describe to people what's going on there while I set this up.
We do hope to have part of this conversation for you at this moment. Again, we are often gotten by the technology that we try to work with here to bring you these conversations. So we're hopefully able to have the CBP officer with us to have the conversation. Sir, can you hear us?
Is that me?
I think he can hear us.
Yeah, Mr. Toth, Jeffrey Toth, by the way, with Customs and Border Protection. We appreciate you kind of missing through all the technology to be able to join us here. If you can hear us, can you give us a rundown of how kind of day one has gone for CBP and all of your officers processing these Canadians coming over?
It went really well. We weren't sure what to anticipate, but I mean, obviously we had a fairly substantial increase in what we've been used to over the last several months, just because of everything being closed. But everything went through pretty smooth. Everyone did everything that we anticipated and wanted them to do, as far as being prepared, having all their documentation ready to go, answering all the questions posed to them on primary. And overall, everything went pretty smooth.
One of the big requirements for Canadians and anyone else crossing over is to be fully vaccinated and to have proof of that. And we've had viewers concerned and saying things like that's impossible to check for sure, and that today is just the start of a flood of unvaccinated people coming in. How do you respond to those concerns people have?
The concerns of unvaccinated personnel coming in?
Yes, for people who say that this is sort of, it's hard to actually prove, it's hard to check, you know, they're concerned about that not actually working. Is there any way you can sort of ease people's minds as to how that process works?
Well, I mean, we work in conjunction with the CDC, and the CDC is the authority on making the determination for actual proof of vaccination, legitimacy behind the vaccination, the documentation, and all of that. So, I mean, we're working hand in hand with them, and as we're going through this process, I mean, some of this stuff is going to be a little bit new for us, but we're going right along with everything that they're recommending. And I mean, as far as I can see, like I said, day one, everything went well. I mean, as far as the proof, everyone that was asked for proof provided proof. Everything went smoothly. Everything looked good. So, I mean, we're just going to have to make adjustments to how we see traffic flows and stuff as it goes, because we haven't had to deal with this for a little while. So, but as we make those adjustments, everything's just going to become easier and easier for everyone involved.
Yeah, and you imagine pretty similar to what happens when Americans go over to Canada. I've talked about this on here. I went just a few weeks back. The difference being Canada requires a negative COVID test in addition to proof of vaccination. You don't have to do that when you're coming into the United States. So presumably it might be, you know, even easier. I want to ask you, because people have seen kind of the video today. We haven't seen long lines as people have tried to come in. But looking ahead, we're certainly going to have busier days, especially as the weekends come up. We've got some holidays. We mentioned there are going to be Sabres games and Bills games. People want to go and ski down at Holiday Valley or other spots. How are you anticipating what that's going to be like once you see kind of more of a crush of Canadians coming across the border?
Well, I mean, it's nothing really changes for us. We've been doing this for several years, and we understand what happens at these different times of year for holiday seasons, different travel periods for Canadians coming in or anybody coming back in. So we prepare like we always do. We take what our facilities have, we take what our personnel has, and then we mitigate everything across depending on what's needed at the time. So if we have a rush of commercial coming through, we shift things around appropriately to make sure that we're covering what we need to cover and that we're facilitating lawful trade and travel as best we can.
We've been chatting with Jeffrey Toth with CBP's Buffalo Field office. Thanks again for bearing with us, and we're glad that we could have this conversation with you tonight.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. Hey, as we've pointed out, one of the key barriers still there at the border crossings is the need to get a negative test to get into Canada. Even for Canadians who come here and then, want to head back home, it can be costly and tough to time out since you have to have it taken within 72 hours of crossing into Canada.
We asked Erie County Executive Mark Polencars about the possibility of Canadians seeking out tests at local sites on this side of the border. He says it's free for anyone.
Erie County will test. I can't control the state sites, but Erie County will test any resident, regardless of whether they're American or Canadian, to determine whether they have COVID-19 or not. All they got to do is call 716-858-2929. They have to schedule their appointment beforehand. It's just not walk-in service, though. But if they schedule it beforehand, we'll test our Canadian neighbors once they come across the border.
And we know a lot of Canadians are headed to Ellicottville. Hollymont Ski Club announced free PCR tests Thursdays and Fridays from 2 to 6 and Saturdays from 9 to 1 to help out Canadian visitors. And that is open to anyone, no appointment needed. And this hasn't just been a big day at the bridges. Airports have been busy as well.
Yes, so many family reunions are happening after nearly 2 years apart for families, thanks to those travel bans, not just, us with Canada, but for countries all over the world. And in many cases that ended today. NBC's Tom Costello is covering that part of the story.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Costello at Dulles International Airport, where we are already seeing tens of thousands of passengers coming into U.S. airports today now that the United States has reopened its borders to nationals from 33 different countries, assuming that they are fully vaccinated and they've uploaded proof of a negative COVID test within the last 72 hours. So they are coming already from China and from Europe and as well from India, across the Canadian border, across the Mexican border, long lines at both the northern and southern borders. Now, this is more evidence that the world is starting to rebound from the pandemic as the United States opens its borders to nationals from 33 countries. Coming up on NBC Nightly News, we'll take you inside those emotional reunions at airports nationwide as families reunite and as the world starts to reconnect.